Hi, I'm Claire, and this is a reading wrap-up for comic books that I've read recently. Most of these I read during the Getting Graphics Readathon, which is a one-day comic book slash graphic works readathon that is organized by Caitlin over at KDG and Eleanor over at Eleanor Reads, and I really enjoyed this one-day readathon. I was actually planning to vlog during it, but then I wasn't feeling great on the day and I kind of wanted to sit in bed in my pajamas and read comic books for half the day. Anyway, the first comic that I read during the readathon was Paper Girls Volume 2. This is written by Brian K. Vaughan. It's illustrated by Cliff Chiang with colors by Matt Wilson and letters by Jared K. Fletcher. Colors by Matt Wilson. They are amazing. It's such a beautiful book. I read the first volume last year because it was nominated for Hugo for Best Graphic Work. These girls who have a paper route together, and then one morning as they are delivering the paper, some weird alien stuff starts to happen and they get wrapped up in it and it gets intense and scary and exciting. It's a really cool sci-fi story, but the first volume kind of left me like, well, I don't really know what the story is about. Because it was so beautiful, and because it's written by Brian K. Vaughan, who did Saga and Why the Last Man, I thought I would pick up Volume 2. I was really excited to read it, because the cliffhanger at the end of Volume 1 was like one of my favorite tropes ever, and I was not disappointed. I really enjoyed this one. It was a bit more linear than the first volume. It was a bit easier to understand. It set up stories and stakes that were a bit more immediately obvious what was going on, and it kind of also leaves off on like an interesting I wonder what's gonna happen next cliffhanger. So I'm pumped to continue with this series. I would definitely recommend, if you've read the first one and you were like not sure, to go into the next book, because I'm really excited to be reading this series regularly now. Next up, I read Bitch Planet Volume 2. This is created by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Valentine Delandro. DeConnick does the writing, Delandro does most of the art. There are colors by Kelly Fitzpatrick. The letters are by Clayton Coles. There is an issue in this that is done by Takisoma. The premise for this story is that we are in an ultra-patriarchal dystopian future in which women have to conform to very strict ideas of what a woman should be like, and if they don't conform to that, if they are loud or rebellious or fat or they try to be political or they just annoy a dude, these women get branded non-compliant and they get sent to a prison planet, affectionately nicknamed Bitch Planet. Much like Paper Girls, I was really intrigued and fascinated by the first volume of Bitch Planet, but I wasn't really sure how I felt about it. Not because it was confusing, because actually I feel like the vision of the future that's portrayed in the first volume was quite clear, but because it was trying to do so much in such a little space of time, I feel like it had so much crammed into it, as so many characters tried to tell so many backstories and at the same time advance the plot in the prison and also advance the plot outside of the prison. I thought that was a bit too much and we didn't get enough of each thing. So that was kind of my only complaint with the first volume. Reading the second volume, I think, again, that gets better. There's a full issue that's the backstory of one of the women in the prison who's quite prominent in the first book, but then a lot of the action is happening in the prison. It felt to me when I was reading it that more stuff was happening in the second volume, that we were getting through more story. I'm gonna show you real quick one page that I particularly enjoyed. It's not a spoiler, it's just a page in between two issues, and I've covered up the actual spoilers. It's this kind of like poster thingy that says, "Is she a feminist?" and gives you like signs to recognize if a woman is a feminist. It includes stuff like she wears glasses, maybe contacts, possibly neither. Also, her arms are hard like a man's. It's also possible that they are soft, but not good soft. This kind of gives you an idea of the sense of humor that this comic book has, and I guess if this isn't the kind of thing that makes you smile and take a picture of the page on Instagram and then tweet about how it me, then maybe this book is not for you. But if that made you smile, then I would suggest picking up Bitch Planet, because it's really good. Next up, I read Clean Room Volume 2 Exile, and this is written by Gail Simone with art by John Davis Hunt and colors by Quentin Winter, letters by Todd Klein. This is a horror comic about the charismatic leader of a weird cult and the journalist who's investigating her, and kind of these two women's dynamic with each other, as well as the weird demon monster things that they both end up fighting. Sometimes together, sometimes not together. My friend Nick gave me the first volume of this comic for my birthday, and I didn't really know what to expect from it because I don't really read a lot of horror, but I really enjoy stories about weird cults. So this has been a really fun kind of delve into a kind of horror that I don't usually read, with like demons and monsters and kind of like weird psychological horror and stuff like that. It is a really creepy book. This is the second volume of 3, so the story is actually going to wrap up in the next book. This is quite a compact story. A lot of stuff happens in the first volume. A lot of stuff also happens in the second volume, but also the first volume was quite kind of like intriguing and a bit confusing also, in terms of you don't really know what's going on. You know that horrible things are going on, but you don't really know what. And in this book, I feel like you get a much better sense of what's going on. So I'm going to read the third one hopefully pretty soon, and then at some point I'm looking forward to going through all 3 of them in a big binge at the same time, because like I said, I'm the kind of person that prefers to read all of a story at once as opposed to installments. The final thing I read during the Getting Graphic Readathon was Descender Volume 4 Orbital Mechanics. This is written by Jeff Lemire and illustrated by Dustin Nguyen. It's all this beautiful watercolor style. This is one of my favorite comic book series that I'm reading at the moment. It's certainly the most beautiful for me in terms of art style and what I prefer to see. I just absolutely love the way that this is drawn and colored, but I also really enjoy the story. This is set in a world where robots used to do everything for humans. They used to be everywhere, except that some years before our story starts, there's something that goes really wrong, and there are some like massive robots that come out of nowhere and murder a bunch of humans. And we end up in a situation where in the current timeline of the story, robots are being rounded up to be melted because humans don't trust robots anymore. And we follow a little companion robot called Tim21 who was made to interact with humans, and all he wants is to get back to whatever family he still has left in the world. But a lot of people want to catch this robot for reasons that become very clear very soon in the first book. This is book 4, so I don't really want to talk about where we're at now in the story in terms of spoilers, because I think this is like a really cool sci-fi story as well as being really beautiful. And I think if you're a sci-fi reader and you enjoy science fiction stories and space opera in general in like novel format and you don't read a lot of comic books, then this would be like a perfect one to kind of get into comics that way. It's such a great story, and this volume I also really enjoyed. I find it very difficult to compare between volumes of one of my favorite stories, but the cliffhanger at the end of this book, man! I really need to know what happens in the next book, and I'm not sure the next book is out yet, so I am gonna have to go check on that, and I might be sad. Basically. The last 2 books that I want to talk about today, I read a little bit before the readathon, but I thought it would make more sense to mention them in this video. The first one is Giant Days Volume 5. This is created and written by John Allison, illustrated by Max Sarin, with inks by Liz Fleming, colors by Whitney Koger, and letters by Jim Campbell. I really like the art style. It's kind of like a bit cartoony, a bit like Disney-y, and I feel like it really suits like the tone of this book and the subject matter of this book. This is the 5th volume in a series about three friends at university and the shenanigans that they get up to. This is one of my favorite series. It's just really fun, heartwarming university slice of life. Each book of Giant Days goes through a lot of smaller events as opposed to going through like one big plot thing as might happen over several issues of, say, Bitch Planet, for instance. I guess the main thing about this book is all the characters feel so much like real people. They have their strengths and their foibles and they act like real friends do, and they tell each other when they have screwed up, but they also support each other. When they find themselves in difficult situations, they usually help one another out of these situations, and it's just so nice and heartwarming, and it gives me warm fuzzies, and I think everybody should read it. And finally, the last book I want to talk about is Jem and the Holograms, Volume 1, Showtime, written by Kelly Thompson with art by Sophie Campbell, colors by M. Victoria Roboto, and letters by Sean Lee, Tom Long, and Robbie Robbins. This is, of course, the story of Jem and the Holograms. It's about four sisters that are in a band, but one of the sisters has terrible stage fright and she can't go and sing in front of people, except that she's the main singer, and it's starting to really cause strife and friction among them until they figure out a way that Jerica can sing in front of everyone without really being in front of everyone, but using a hologram, who then becomes Jem from Jem and the Holograms. And in this book, Jem and the Holograms enter a competition to win the chance to sing off against the Misfits, a super famous girl band, where all the members of that band kind of hate each other and keep yelling at each other, and they're kind of terrible to one another. And then they also end up meeting a bunch of other characters around the Misfits as well, and they have some kind of interpersonal stories. There's a romantic subplot between one of the sisters in Jem and the Holograms and one of the girls who is in the Misfits, and the rest of the Misfits aren't particularly happy about it. There's also another romantic subplot about Jerica, the girl who pretends to be Jem and the Holograms' manager and not in fact secretly Jem, and she has a relationship with a music journalist who's starting to get nosy and ask questions about why is Jem never there when I see you and blah blah blah. It was fun, but there were things that really bugged me when I was reading it that really kind of took me out of the story and made it so that I didn't really enjoy it that much. The Misfits are just terrible people. The romantic subplot between Jerica and the journalist is not really my cup of tea. He feels very pushy and aggressive and overconfident in a way that like just does not make him charming at all to me. Like, I guess the book thinks that's what it's doing, but it doesn't come across that way for me, and I guess I don't actually have the nostalgia for this property that makes me go, yeah, I'll buy every single time that it jumps the shark. I wanted to like this. It sounded like it could be adorable, but it's not for me, I'm afraid, so I won't be continuing that. Which makes me a bit sad. I wanted to like this one. So that's it for today's comic book wrap up. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these comics or if you've got any recommendations based on the things that I talked about in this video, because of course I'm not currently reading and purchasing enough comic books on a regular basis. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check out a previous video right about here. And if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button that's on my face right here for more videos from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.